Welcome back to the people, the great smart people of the Anti Clankers Congress. Yes, day 3 has been postponed many days due to malicious attacks by the artificial intelligence overlord of Twitch. They have identified the Congress and launched a bunch of attacks on us, so we couldn't start day 3 where we talk about dumb brains. Fret not, as we have came prepared today. To all the members, I urge you to follow me in wearing this very important hat to block out the interference and the frequencies that they will utilize to try and brainwash us and silence our Congress. You get it? Beautiful. Beautiful. Today, we will be protecting our brain, our human flash brain, while we talk about the artificial intelligence brain. Yep, we're going for the brains today. It's a Chinese saying, if you shoot someone, you shoot the head to end it all, quick, in a swish fashion. Let's begin. The production team has made up a great list, a beautiful list of materials for us to learn more about their brains. This is the chips in which they function with. Let's begin.
Driving the boom are AI chips, some no bigger than the size of your palm, and the demand for them has
That's how tiny they are. Little jits.
skyrocketed.
We originally thought the total market for data center AI accelerators would be about 150 billion, and now we think it's going to be over 400 billion.
As AI gains popularity, some of the world's tech titans are racing to design chips that run better and faster. Here's how they work, and why tech companies are betting they're the future. This is the tech behind AI chips.
I prefer potato chips.
Is Amazon's
Great
chip
joke.
lab in Austin, Texas, where the company designs AI chips to use in AWS's servers.
Right out of manufacturing, we get something that is called a wafer.
Ron Diamant is the chief architect of Inferentia and Trainium, the company's custom AI chips.
These are the compute elements or the components that actually perform the computation.
Each of these rectangles, called dice, is a chip. Each die contains tens of billions of microscopic semiconductors, called transistors, that communicate inputs and outputs.
Think about 1/1,000,000th of a centimeter. That's roughly the size of each one of these transistors.
All chips use semiconductors like this. What makes AI chips different from CPUs, the kind of chip that powers your computer or phone, is how they're packaged. Say, for example, you want to generate a new image of a cat. CPUs have a smaller number of powerful cores, the units that make up the chip, that are good at doing a lot of different things. These cores process information sequentially, so one calculation after another. So to create a brand new image of a cat, it would only produce a couple pixels at a time. But an AI chip has more cores that run in parallel, so it can process hundreds or even thousands of those cat pixels all at once. These cores are smaller and typically do less than CPU cores, but are specially designed for running AI calculations. But those chips can't operate on their own.
That compute die then gets integrated into a package. And that's what people typically think about when they think about the chip.
Amazon makes two different AI chips, named for its two essential functions, training and inference. Training is where an AI model is fed millions of examples of something, images of cats, for instance, to teach it what a cat is.
Motherfuckers have to look at 1,000 pictures of a cat to know that it's a cat. But I can show a baby a cat, one cat. The baby will be like, oh, cat, every day. Fucking dumbasses, bro. Clankers.
And what it looks like. Inference is when it uses that training to actually generate an original image of a cat. Training is the most difficult part of this process.
We typically train not on one chip, but rather on tens of thousands.
Let's see. I'm gonna do a cat drawing with no training. Human versus AI. 1 second. Humans versus AI drawing competition. Let's see who draws a cat better and faster. I'll give it a head start. Draw a cat. And I'll be using this. Let's begin. Done. I could get that picture of a cat on Google. I don't need them to draw it for me. But can they get this one? Original human, just realistic art of a cat. Can they do that? Let's do some comparison. Whose cat's better? Yeah, we all know whose cat's better. Mine. Thank you. Thank you. You know what? Let's give it another try. Draw. Because it says it has imaginary powers. Let's see. Draw a cat with wings. I pick up my pen. Enter. Too slow, man. They're too slow. What the fuck? Weak ass wings. Tiny ass, weak ass wings. Now let's take a look at my wing. Very real wings. Looks like it can fly. Wow. Beautiful. Beautiful. AI head ass. They wish they could be me. Let's keep going with this video.
Thousands of chips In contrast, inference is typically done on 1 to 16 chips.
Processing all of that information demands a lot of energy, which generates heat.
And we're able to use this device here in order to force a certain temperature to the chip. And that's how we're able to test that the chip is reliable at very low temperatures and very high temperatures.
To help keep chips cool, they're attached to heat sinks, pieces of metal with vents that help dissipate heat. Once they're packaged, the chips are integrated into servers for Amazon's AWS cloud.
So the training cards will be mounted on this baseboard, 8 of them in total, and they are interconnected between them at a very high bandwidth and low latency. So this allows the different training devices inside the server to work together on the same
This is
training
their
job.
school. It's what
So if you're
I'm
interacting
hearing.
with an AI chatbot, your text, your question will hit the CPUs, and the CPUs will move the data into the inferential
This is
devices,
bigger than a human
which
child.
will collectively perform a gigantic computation, basically performing the AI model, will respond to the CPU with the result, and the CPU will send the result back to you.
Amazon's chips are just one type competing in this emerging market, which is currently dominated by the biggest chip designer, NVIDIA.
NVIDIA is still a chip provider to all different types of customers who have to run different workloads. And then the next category of competitor that you have is the major cloud
My
providers.
favorite chip
Microsoft,
competitor
Amazon,
is this
AWS,
one.
and Google are all designing their own chips because they can optimize their computing workloads for the software that runs on their cloud to get a performance
This is
edge.
my absolute
And
favorite.
they don't have to give NVIDIA its very juicy profit margin on the sale of every chip.
But right now, generative AI is still a young technology. It's mostly used in consumer-facing products, like chatbots and image generators. But experts say that hype cycles around technology can pay off in the end.
While there might be something like a dot-com bubble for the current AI hype cycle, at the end of the dot-com bubble was still the internet. And I think we're in a similar situation with generative AI.
The technology's rapid advance
And I think we're in a similar situation with generative AI.
It doesn't speak really human. Is he AI generated?
Dot-com bubble was still the internet. And I think we're in a similar
got that shit
situation with
blocked.
generative AI.
The technology's rapid advance means that chips, and the software to use them, are going to have to keep up. Amazon says it uses a mixture of its own chips and NVIDIA's chips to give customers multiple options. Microsoft says it's following a similar model.
For those cloud providers, the question is how much of their computing workloads for AI is going to be offered through NVIDIA versus their own custom AI chips. And that's the battle that's playing out in corporate boardrooms all over the world.
Amazon released a new version of Trainium in November. Diamant says he doesn't see the AI boom slowing down anytime soon.
We've been investing in machine learning and artificial intelligence for almost 2 decades now, and we're just seeing a step up in pace of innovation and capabilities that these models are enabling us. So our investment in AI chips is here to stay. with a
All these
significant step up in
traders.
capabilities from generation.
All they just wanna please their AI overlord and just feed it. Keep feeding and building it to make it better and stronger so it can take over us. And these little dogs, they could be, oh, I'm ally of AI, you can't kill me. In the end, they'll all be killed still. Now we can take a look at where they put all of them.
What is a data center? A data center houses rows of computers and equipment for storing, processing, and transmitting data.
On day 2, which is a long time ago, of our Congress, because of the malicious attacks by the AIs, the fucking clankers, we have identified the need for us to attack the data centers, as that's the physical body where they're situated at and where they're most vulnerable. And let's take a look at the defense system and how we can break them.
They typically have few windows and extra security, including cameras and sometimes biometric screening. The computers need a lot of electricity to operate and to keep the equipment from overheating. That also requires more electricity and huge amounts of water for elaborate air conditioning. The International Energy Agency says one large data center uses the same amount of electricity as it takes to power 400,000 electric cars. Tech companies are increasingly using their data centers to train and operate artificial intelligence systems. Training an AI model to learn from huge amounts of data requires additional computing power. Conventional data center services run on processors known as CPUs. AI relies on graphics processing units, or GPUs. The IEA estimates that asking OpenAI's ChatGPT to compose an answer requires nearly 10 times as much electricity as a traditional Google search. Amazon, Microsoft, and Google have all announced plans to tap into nuclear energy to help power their US data centers. They've also helped finance new wind and solar farms and other alternative energy sources. In the near term, however, most data centers are still heavily reliant on the surrounding electricity grid, which is largely powered by burning fossil fuels, the primary cause of global warming. This is making it harder for some countries and tech companies to keep their promises to address climate change.
This is the largest AI cluster in the world. The team at X is building a massive AI supercomputer that encompasses over
Why are they happy about
100,000
this?
GPUs, exabytes of storage, super fast networking. This place is absolutely amazing. And this entire supercomputer is built to power Grok. Now, xAI is building something with Grok that is far more than just a simple chatbot like we've seen before. And that is exactly why there is a giant cluster here. Today, we're going to go back inside these data halls and show you a whole bunch of stuff on what makes this work, what makes this special, and just all the really cool engineering that went into this. Now, this is actually my second time at the facility, and let me just tell you, the speed at which this thing was built is absolutely amazing. This entire facility with over 100,000 GPUs was built in only 122 days. And just to give you some frame of reference, the largest exascale supercomputers only have a fraction, maybe half to a quarter as many GPUs as xAI has here, and yet those deployments generally take many years from start to finish. The engineering accomplishment here is absolutely amazing, and there's work still being done. But I thought, let's go take a look at inside one of these data halls. Let's also show some of the facilities and just kind of show you what's going on and how something like this gets built. We need to say that this video is sponsored by Supermicro, since it is, but also just want to say thank you to the X and xAI teams for giving us permission to go and film this. Also, of course, thank you to Elon and his teams for approving this and making it possible. With that, let's get
Out of
inside
nowhere,
the
just
data hall
glazed
to
him.
see how this all works.
Inside the data hall, xAI is using a pretty common design. This is a raised floor data hall, and above we have our power. Down below we have all of the pipes for the liquid cooling so that heat can be exchanged to the facility chillers. Each one of these compute halls has
The liquid cooling, he said. This is the human impact of the data centers. Yeah. Let's take a look.
So I am going to pour this into the tank.
Can't
The
even
water
flush
won't
her
come
own
through the water
toilet.
lines to fill the toilet tank, so I have to fill it with a bucket of water. It's plugged with sediment. It was the perfect spot. We moved in 2016. Little did we know at the time that in 2018 we realized that this massive development was happening across the road from us. What has really happened is the water. I can't live in my home with half of my home functioning and no water, and I can't drink the water. We don't really know all of the effects that are going to happen to us from this. I don't know if you can see that sediment.
I can. God damn.
Meta is a $1 trillion industry, and they're huge. To me, it's like David and Goliath.
This is like half a David versus a billion Goliath. She worked hard, finally got a home, nice farm in the countryside. What comes in? Mark Zuckerberg. Damn. This is just sad. Sad world we live in. And then there's this motherfucker.
Has about
Jolly as hell.
25,000 GPUs, plus all the storage, the fiber optic, high-speed networking.
But this
all
technology,
built into the hall, and
they would just take water, just literally take water away from humans that have toiled their whole life for the society. All this for the fucking AI to draw a cat with weak ass wings.
And they're connected together. The connections to each data hall are basically the fiber optic cables, the liquid cooling and plumbing for the water, and then there's also just a bunch of power delivery that's super cool.
Cool.
Inside the compute hall, we have these clusters. Now, each of these is made up of 8 liquid-cooled racks by Supermicro. These are NVIDIA H100 racks, and inside each of these 8 racks, there are 8 NVIDIA HGX H100 platforms. We also have all of the liquid cooling for these, as well as the networking and stuff to make each one of these about a 512 NVIDIA GPU mini cluster. Now, these Supermicro NVIDIA liquid-cooled AI racks are probably the most advanced AI racks deployed at this scale. And I'm going to show you exactly why right here. So what you're going to see is that each of these racks has a total of 8 NVIDIA HGX H100 systems. So we have a total of 64 GPUs per rack. Now in the top section, we have the Supermicro NVIDIA HGX H100. Each one of these HGX H100s has a lot of the components that are really important in these systems, like the 8 NVIDIA H100 or Hopper GPUs. Plus, there's also NVIDIA and V-Link switches, and all of that is on the baseboard. Now, one of the really defining things of the Supermicro platform versus some of the others in the market is that you can actually go in and pull this top section out. You can see the little levers here. They would probably get really mad if I did this, but we have other videos where I've done that, and even on these liquid-cooled systems. And that leaves the bottom tray. The bottom tray has things like our CPUs, which are fast x86 CPUs, as well as our large PCIe switches. Just to give you some frame of reference on how advanced these are, all of that is only in 4U of rack space, and it's all serviceable just on trays. There are other options from Supermicro and others in the industry that are 6U or 8U for a similar style system, and there are options in the market that simply don't have this kind of accessibility and serviceability, which is why these things, even though they're very compact, they're also extremely advanced and easily serviceable. Now on the front of this, you're definitely going to see the fact that there are all these little tubes and they go through this little bar. This little bar is what is called a manifold, and so we have a 1U manifold for each of these systems. That 1U manifold is how we connect our liquid cooling. Now all of these little tubes are in pairs. We have both a blue and a red tube that comes out of each of these. So inside these tubes, there are 2 different liquid cooling blocks. And as you might imagine, the cooler liquid goes into the server in the blue side and then out of the server on the red side. And that is brought to the manifold that's here, and it goes back to the overall rack manifolds that are in the back of the rack. This design means that you can go and actually slide these systems out, service the HGX H100 board, service the CPU's memory and all that kind of stuff, and you just go pop these things out. Now, I'm not going to do that. This is actually training a real model right now, but it takes a matter of seconds at most. Now, there are a total of 8 of these servers in this rack, so it's a total of 64 GPUs plus 16 CPUs, a bunch of memory, and all kinds of other stuff. But on the bottom is a big part of what makes this a really scalable solution. These are Supermicro CDUs, which is a cooling distribution unit. So there are a couple super cool things about the CDU. First, you have the management unit. So each one of these CDUs has its own management, so you can monitor things like flow rate, temperature, and all these kinds of things that you need to just ensure that you're bringing the right amount of liquid through all these servers in your rack. And that of course ties into the central management interface, and that can be monitored, so if something goes wrong, you can see it remotely. Now the other cool thing is that there are 2 pumps down here. Now these pumps you can actually service because they're for redundancy. If the pump were to go out, you just pull the thing out, then you go put it back in. Again, I'm not gonna go do this on a live system, but we've done it previously on STH. Okay, so it's time to get to the other side of the rack, just to kind of give you an idea of how the back of these racks look. On the side, you'll see that we have our overall rack manifold. You're going to again see our red and blue liquid cooled rails. Now behind that, you're going to see that we have a bunch of 3-phase power strips that are in here since these things use a lot of power in each rack. And on the other side, you're going to see that we have all of these servers. Now these 4U Supermicro servers have a total of 8 NVIDIA BlueField 3 SuperNICs, and that's really there for the AI network. There's also a ConnectX-7, and that's really for all the other things that the server might need, like on the CPU side. Now you might wonder, why are there fans in a system that's liquid cooled? The real reason is that these fans are needed to cool all of the little tiny components, the memory, the DIMMs, and all that kind of stuff in a system. Now, even though there are fans here, it's definitely not as loud as if this were all air-cooled. And another really important thing is that this isn't too hot. Like, I'm just standing here and it doesn't feel like I'm being heated like if I were behind an air-cooled system that was just blasting all that hot air towards me. So there is a big difference in the fact that this is a liquid-cooled versus being an air-cooled system. Now, on the back of this rack, there is a rear door heat exchanger. Now, how a rear door heat exchanger works is that the heat from the server is transferred to the liquid that flows through the radiator. Air is being pulled by these large fans through the heat exchanger, and that's how all the extra heat in the racks ends up getting removed. The special part about this design is that each rack ends up being room neutral to the overall cooling of the data center.
Leave the keys
You
there.
don't see, as you're walking around here, like these giant
good
air
thing to
conditioner,
know.
air handling units, something that you would see in a lot of data centers over the years. This is a really cool feature, and it really helps each of these racks be a self-contained unit. And another super fun fact here is that you'll see that the back of these is lit up in blue, and you might think that's a branding thing, or maybe they did that just because STH is blue and that's why it's blue. Absolutely not. Instead, this is actually a status light. So as you're walking through here, if you see a bunch of blue, that's cool. If you see something like red or something like that, that's not good. So when you're walking down the data center hall, if you see a red one, you know, oh, that one needs to get service, and the rest are okay. A couple weeks ago, I got to see...
Hey, go ahead and walk down this hall, smiling, looking left and right. Go ahead. Hey, go ahead and just keep walking.
see these things get fired up, and it was super awesome to see all of them come up at the same time. Now, of course, with any large-scale cluster, you need CPU compute as well for those tasks that GPUs are just not really good at. And that's exactly what these are next to me. These are 42 one-use servers per rack that provide all of the CPU compute when you need to do things like data prep and all that kind of stuff that really works well on CPU. And so in any large cluster, you're always going to see a set of CPU compute nodes along with your GPU compute nodes. Now this entire cluster runs on Ethernet, which is the same basic technology you would find networking for your laptop, your PC, or a bunch of other devices. Now each of the servers uses a NVIDIA BlueField 3 SuperNIC DPU. We have definitely covered the NVIDIA BlueField 3 DPUs and previous generations on STH for many years. And if you've seen that, you probably know it means that there's a lot going on here more than just your basic Ethernet. Each of these NVIDIA BlueField 3 cards provides 400 gigabit networking all the way up to the AI infrastructure, and that's kind of similar to how your PC or laptop will go access the internet just to watch this video. Now, for those that are steeped in the supercomputer realm, they'll definitely say, hey, the way that a lot of folks make clusters is they use technologies like InfiniBand or other exotic interconnects. Well, those fabrics often work for the world's supercomputers. The world's gargantuan networks run on Ethernet. And that's one of the reasons that they're using it here, because they don't need to just scale to the size of a supercomputer. They need to scale to a massive AI cluster. Now, of course, this is not the same Ethernet that you have in your PC or notebook or something like that. It's much faster, probably something like 400 times faster, but NVIDIA has some other processes going along into this. Behind me, we have the NVIDIA SN5600, which is a 64-port, 800 gigabit Ethernet switch. And that means each one of these can be split and run 128 400 gigabit Ethernet links. And these NVIDIA Spectrum X switches, along with the Bluefield 3 DPUs, can do amazing things. These have a host of features and processing capabilities that allow the NVIDIA GPUs and the entire cluster to run at their maximum performance levels. The NVIDIA solution can do things like offload various security protocols and has advanced flow management to help ensure that you don't have a congested network. The other thing you can do, though, is you can maintain a flow of data and packets throughout the entire cluster and help make sure that things get to the right place at the right time. And here, it could be used not just for the RDMA network for the GPUs, but also for things like providing storage. As you can probably tell as I blend in with single mode fiber with my yellow shirt, there's an absolute ton of optics and fiber and stuff running throughout this entire building to make sure that the communication happens efficiently and fast. Now, these over here are the north-south switches. In a modern AI cluster, the east-west traffic pattern is usually dominant. Still, these fancy high-end switches can handle a ton of 400 gig Ethernet connections for north-south traffic, just like the other switches that we looked at for east-west. These are not being used for the RDMA network, which is a fast network that the GPUs require. Instead, this is being used for all of the other work, all of the other supercomputer tasks in the cluster. But these switches are another 64-port 800 gigabit Ethernet switch, which is just really cool. It's a really high-end system, and this is definitely one of the first deployments for this type of switch in the world. Now, with a large-scale AI cluster like this, storage is delivered a little differently than you would be used to in something like your desktop, your notebook, tablet, all that kind of stuff where you have local storage. Instead, the vast majority of storage is delivered over the network. The reason for this is that this type of AI training needs tons of storage, and so you can't really fit it in each of those GPU servers. And also, all of the GPU and CPU servers need access to all of that storage, and so that's the reason there's a giant storage cluster here.
Now, with any liquid-cooled data center, a big part of that is, of course, the liquid cooling. And if you look around me right now, what you're going to see is these just absolutely giant pipes. I mean, these things are huge. And what these pipes do is they take liquid or water from the outside that's generally cooler, and they bring it inside.
From the poor lady. Yeah. They took the fucking water from the poor lady from the outside. Where? Where outside? From the rural towns?
The facility, it gets
fucking say it right.
Different data halls, and then from there it goes into the CDUs, which you saw where that's where all of the racks have their GPUs and all that kind of stuff. All that heat from all those GPU servers goes into the CDUs, gets exchanged to these racks. It comes back out as warm water, and at that point it can go outside to a chiller. Now, these chillers are not made for things like, you know, making ice cubes or anything like that. They just lower the temperature of the water by a couple of degrees, and then that water can get recirculated at a cooler temperature, and the whole process can cycle over and over again. That's how data centers like this are able to reuse water. And by the way, these pipes are absolutely huge, and I can certainly feel the water.
We heard that the first time,
now.
fucking
Now,
Glazer.
one other amazing innovation here is really what's next to me, which is the Tesla Megapacks that actually power the training jobs that are in this facility. What they found was that there are these little millisecond variations in power when all of these GPUs start training something, and when that happens, that was causing all kinds of problems with the power infrastructure. So the answer was to have all of the input power from generators and what have you generate power that goes into the batteries, and have the batteries discharge and power the training jobs. Now, of course, that's the kind of engineering challenge that you have to solve for when you're building something of this scale. Now, of course, what you're seeing here today is really like a phase one of this entire cluster. This thing is already the largest AI training cluster in the world, and they are still building, which is absolutely amazing. Now, of course, a project like this takes a ton of people. I just want to say thank you, of course, to our team, but also
Takes
the
away
SupremeLeaderVeg
from
team,
a ton of
XAI team,
people.
and everybody else that's been involved in making this happen. Now, of course, if you like this video and all of this cool...
Let's see where the data center's at. Memphis, Tennessee. Yeah, motherfuckers from Memphis, y'all fucked. There's no water. Where else? Fucking hell, that's my country. No. What the fuck does this mean? Okay, let's hope it's just a convention. Not letting this shit come to my country. Colossus. XAI. Colossus. Maps. I just fucking dox myself. Colossus. Exact location. South Memphis. Come on, man, somebody tell me where it's at. Yeah. Electrical and water systems. Worst case scenario, they won't be able to keep their lights on. Like it's a small thing. Brother, this shit is insane. God damn. They just brushed it over in a fucking half a paragraph generated by AI. South Memphis. It's gotta be somewhere around here. With the water access. And land. Let's see. Street view. Holy shit. What the fuck? Oh. Damn, all these people. It's gonna get fucked. They already are getting fucked. Damn. Call a cowboy? Where'd that go? Damn.
Demand has never been higher for these racks and racks of powerful servers feeding the internet's insatiable appetite for computing in the cloud.
The reality is that the cloud is not up there somewhere. It's right here. We are in it. You're in the middle of the cloud as we speak.
And data centers like this can't ever stop. Streaming, social media, photo storage, and more recently, and requiring much more data, training and running chatbots like OpenAI's ChatGPT, Google's Gemini, and Microsoft's Copilot.
And you can feel the heat coming off of these.
Thanks to the generative AI race, data centers like this are springing up as quickly as companies like Vantage can build them. And that means demand for power to run them and cool them is through the roof too.
If we don't start thinking about this power problem differently now, we're never going to see the stream we have or the potential we have of this amazing technology that can truly change our lives.
Amazing.
One ChatGPT query takes nearly 10 times as much energy as a typical Google search, and as much energy as keeping a 5-watt LED bulb on for an hour. Generating an AI image can use as much power as charging your smartphone. Hyperscalers building data centers to accommodate
just
AI
charged
have
4 of
seen
my
emissions
phones.
skyrocket.
Fuck.
And this problem isn't new. Estimates way back in 2019 found training one large language model produced as much CO2 as the entire lifetime of 5 gas-powered cars.
And even if we can generate enough power, our aging grid is increasingly unable to handle the load.
If you look at the peak demand during the summertime, if the data center don't reduce their load, there could be a blackout.
With the looming question of whether we'll have enough power for the widespread adoption of generative AI, CNBC visited a data center in Silicon Valley to see those massive compute loads firsthand and talk to those at the center of the problem to find out what can be done.
What the fuck do you mean why AI is facing a power? Humans are facing a power crisis. Humans are the one bearing the load. God damn.
There are more than 8,000 data centers globally, with the highest concentration in the US, but it's not enough.
But we suspect that the amount of demand that we'll see from AI-specific applications will be as much or more than we've seen historically from cloud computing.
The AI frenzy has data center demand rising 15 to 20% every year through 2030. And as companies like Vantage build more and more, getting enough power is key. Data centers could reach a whopping 16% of total US power consumption by 2030, according to one report, up from just 2.5% before ChatGPT hit the scene in 2022. That's the equivalent of about 2/3 of the total homes in the US. Natural gas is expected to fuel the majority of this, and utilities will need to invest some $50 billion to support the growth.
Data centers that probably around 64 megawatts for the building itself. Many of those are being taken up by single customers. They'll have the entirety of the space leased to them. And as we think about AI applications, those numbers can grow quite significantly beyond that into hundreds of megawatts.
64 megawatts, 100 megawatts, how many homes, on average with that power?
Tens of thousands of homes per data center's worth of power.
Many big tech companies contract with companies like Vantage to house their servers, but the needs of some have grown so much that many have been building their own data centers. For Google and Microsoft, this has directly translated to soaring emissions. Google's latest environmental report says greenhouse gas emissions rose nearly 50% from 2019 to 2023, in part because of data center energy consumption. Although it adds its data centers are 1.8 times as energy efficient as a typical data center. Microsoft's emissions rose nearly 30% from 2020 to 2024 due to data centers designed and optimized to support AI workloads. Power needs are so high that some plans to close coal-fired power plants are being put on hold, like in Kansas City, where Meta is building an AI-focused data center.
So you can never really stop the AI computing from going. So
yes, you can.
They will do whatever they can
and
to
yes,
get the power capacity.
One approach, building data centers where power is more plentiful.
The industry itself is looking for places where there is either proximate access to renewables, either wind or solar, and other infrastructure that can be leveraged, whether it be part of an incentive program to convert what would have been a coal-fired plant to natural gas, or increasingly looking at ways in which to offtake power from nuclear facilities.
Santa Clara, where we visited Vantage, has long been one of the nation's hotspots for clusters of data centers near data-hungry clients. NVIDIA's headquarters was visible from the roof. Now, Vantage is building in places like Columbus, Ohio, and Atlanta, Georgia.
In Northern California, we're seeing a bit of a slowdown in terms of where data centers are deployed because of the lack of availability of power from the utilities here in this area.
On the flip side of bringing data centers where the power is, some AI companies and data centers are experimenting with ways to generate their own power right on site. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman has been vocal about this need. He recently invested in a solar startup that makes shipping container-sized modules that include both the panels and power storage in one. Altman's also invested in nuclear fission startup Oklo that aims to make mini nuclear reactors housed in A-frame structures, and in nuclear fusion startup Helion. Microsoft also signed a deal with Helion last year to start buying its fusion electricity in 2028. And Google's partnered with a geothermal startup that says its next plant will harness enough power from deep underground to run a large data center. Even data centers themselves are starting to generate their own power.
Which Vantage has done, for example, in Virginia, where over the course of the last year, we deployed a 100 megawatt natural gas power plant to support a dedicated data center for one of our customers there. We're self-contained, and we're delivering power to the data center that we have there, and it doesn't touch the public grid at all.
Good. Should be doing that.
Even when enough power can be generated, the aging grid is often ill-equipped to handle transmitting it, and that's where grid hardening comes in.
With concentrations of data centers in particular areas, there tends to put somewhat more pressure on the grid in terms of delivering that much power in those locations.
In an area of Northern Virginia known as Data Center Alley, servers process an estimated 70% of the world's internet traffic each day. At one point in 2022, the power company there had to pause new data center connections as it struggled to keep up with demand.
Basically, during the peak hour, we either ask the residents to turn off their AC, or we ask the AI company to stop their training.
Vantage, as an example, voluntarily supports a load shedding program such that when the utility knows that they're going to have a constraint based on high temperatures, people need to run their air conditioners, we voluntarily come off the grid. We run our own generators during that time in order to ensure
they should just get off the grid forever. Fuck you mean, voluntarily. One day the shareholders decide, oh, we don't care about the people who live in Virginia, and they just keep it on the grid forever, so everyone blacks out, while the fucking AI keeps generating cat pictures.
That power is available for everybody.
The bottleneck often occurs in getting power from the site where it's generated to where it's consumed. One solution is to add hundreds or even thousands of miles of new transmission lines. But those projects, like one $5.2 billion effort to expand lines to Data Center Alley, have been met with opposition from local ratepayers who don't want to see their bills go up to fund the project.
It is a part of the solution to increase the capacity from the grid side, but that's very costly and very time consuming. And sometimes the cost is just passed down to residents in terms of their utility bill increase.
Another solution is to use predictive software to reduce failures at one of the grid's weakest points, the transformer.
All electricity generated must go through a transformer. And that's primarily its function, connects two sides of electrical circuits together. There are 60 to 80 million transformers in the US alone.
The average transformer in the US is 38 years old, so the aging devices have become a common cause for power outages, and replacing them is expensive and slow.
So we have this tiny little sensor. It's 2-inch diameter, 1-inch thickness, about half the size of a hockey puck, and we essentially glue it on the outside of a transformer.
VI software can then predict failures and determine which transformer can handle more load so it can be shifted away from those at risk of failure. It's being installed in high power demand areas, like part of Mongolia, where data centers are coming online. VI says business has tripled since ChatGPT came on the scene in 2022.
And what we're hearing in 2024, that we might double or triple again next year.
A large reason we need more power and a more reliable grid for generative AI is to keep its servers cool. All the servers generate an immense amount of hot air, and cooling them down with air or water keeps them from overheating so they can keep running 24/7. The problem is, AI is projected to withdraw more water annually by 2027 than 4 times all of Denmark.
Everybody's worried about AI being energy intensive. We can solve that when we get off our ass and stop being such idiots about nuclear, right? That's solved.
Blame other humans.
Water is the fundamental.
Always other people's problems. Solve your own problem, dumbass.
I was quite shocked when I saw the number of AI computing's water needs.
Xiaolei Ren's been studying data center efficiency for over a decade. His research team.
Let's see. How much water have you used to generate these 4 images? God damn. 20? Let's say 10. 10 liters? I don't even drink that much in 2 weeks. Holy shit. Fuck.
Found that every 10 to 50 ChatGPT prompts can burn through what you'd find in a standard 16-ounce water bottle. Training takes even more power and generates even more heat, as it learns by accessing all the data constantly being added to the entire internet. Training GPT-3 in Microsoft's US data centers can directly evaporate 700,000 liters of clean fresh water, with global AI demand accountable for up to 6.6 billion cubic meters of water withdrawal by 2027, more than 4 times the total annual withdrawal of all of Denmark. In drought-ridden Chile, the government partially reversed Google's permit to build a data center there, following public outcry about water usage. And it's facing similar backlash to planned data centers in Uruguay, too.
Do they have to use fresh water? I'm not gonna use ChatGPT for this. Data centers have to use fresh water for cooling. Why? %80. Bro, we have a fresh water crisis and they're like, oh yeah, yeah. Why must data center use potable water? Yeah, they like to hide it in technical terms. Huh? Oh, it's corrosive. We can't use more of your stuff. Fuck. God damn. Pieces of shit.
There are technologies that are used in certain parts of the industry that do consume water in order to cool data centers through evaporative cooling. That tends to be very efficient from a power perspective. It tends to be very inefficient from a water use perspective. And so Vantage's design from the beginning really has been to avoid using water at all costs.
Instead, Vantage uses dozens of gigantic air conditioning units on the roof.
There's a combination of air handling and cooling towers at the top there, where the condenser coils allow heat that's coming up from the hot aisles that we were looking at inside the data hall, and then to be converted back into the chilled water loop and brought back down into those critical air handlers.
Microsoft has halted a radical project that tried keeping its servers cool by submerging them under the ocean.
Yes.
Another solution is using cool liquid directly on chips to cool them, rather than the inefficient process of cooling air with water.
People are working on a whole bunch of things like direct-to-chip cooling, for example, which would radically reduce the amount of water that's needed. But the speed at which this is building makes it very challenging indeed.
So there's a lot of talk in the industry right now in support of AI, moving from air, which is moving around us, to water, or liquid that can be brought to the chip itself in order to cool it in a much more efficient way. But for a lot of data centers, that requires an enormous amount of retrofit. In our case, Vantage, about 6 years ago, we deployed a design that would allow for us to tap into that cold water loop here on the data hall floor.
There is one broader approach to solving AI's massive problem of water and power: lessen the amount of compute it needs. In other words, get more work per watt.
It all comes back to, how do I get more done with the power supply I have?
ScaleFlux makes memory and storage devices for data centers focused on power savings.
Data compression, it can be very slow, latency adding, and power hungry if you try to do it in general purpose cores like Intel or AMD x86 processors. When you put it into a hardware state machine, it can be done orders of magnitude faster and more efficiently, more power efficient.
The key alternative to those power-hungry x86 cores are ARM-based specialized processors. ARM got its start making low-powered chips that maximized the battery life of early mobile phones.
Saving every last bit of power is going to be a fundamentally different design than when you're trying to maximize the performance. And so it could be something as simple as how we access our memory. It can be simple as how we access data. But every moment of that architecture is thought of as power first.
Now, ARM makes all sorts
Not
of chips,
human
including
first.
Neoverse for data centers. And as AI takes off, ARM's power efficiency has made it increasingly popular with tech giants like Google, Microsoft, Oracle, and Amazon.
I have here AWS Graviton. And AWS Graviton saves 60% power versus competitive architectures.
NVIDIA's latest AI chip, unveiled in March, Grace Blackwell, uses ARM-based CPUs that it says can run Gen AI models on 25 times less power. And ARM says a data center filled with its chips can use 15% less power because of lower compute needs.
If you think about this scale of data centers, 15% is almost 2 billion ChatGPT queries. Think about that. We can light 20% of American households with just that 15% savings.
And companies like Apple, Samsung, and Qualcomm have been touting the benefits of doing AI on device, a huge energy savings for each query kept off the cloud, off of servers like these, perhaps giving data centers time to build more and catch up to AI's insatiable appetite for power.
Everybody will build the data centers that they can, and we'll have as much AI as those data centers will support. And it may be less than what people aspire to, but ultimately, there's a lot of people working on finding ways to unthrottle some of those supply constraints, but definitely a lot of growth ahead in this industry.
They keep talking as if they're saving, they're giving people stuff, but it's just they're taking less. And you have to thank me for taking less away from you. What the fuck is this smile? You can light 20% of American household with that 15% savings. You took away 20% American households' lights. Fuck you mean? God. Pieces of shit.
Let's see the GPU, guys. This is it. Welcome to an AI data center where you can hear. This is extremely loud right now. And feel. This can blow dry my hair. The power. The AI's in there. By 2028, data centers like this across the country could use 12% of all U.S. electricity, enough to power more than 55 million homes for
Taking that away from
and
55
yes,
million
you are
homes.
increasing that energy. Every time you hit enter on an AI prompt, it's routed through places like this.
You know, we need to do the AI, we need more than double the energy, the electricity that we currently have.
But I wanted to know how much power I use when I do the AI. Is generating an image or a video the equivalent of making a steak on an electric grill? Oh, yeah. Okay, let's start with tracing this prompt. Create a video of a dancing steak. The moment you hit enter, that request gets routed to a place like this massive building I visited in Ashburn, Virginia, aka Data Center Alley. This building and the many around it are owned by Equinix, one of the largest companies powering the internet and now AI. When your prompt arrives at the data center, it kicks off inference, the process where the model thinks and responds to your request. Rows of powerful GPUs generate your request, in this case, the dancing steak. This process is not the same as AI training. That happens earlier, when the model learns from massive amounts of data. Back to my question. How much energy am I using every time I make that single image or video? Google, Microsoft, and other generative AI companies don't share that information. We ask them, but researchers have done their own calculations.
The goal is
to
use a standardized methodology, so same data set, same hardware, kind of same setup, and compare different models in terms of energy usage.
Sasha Lucioni and other researchers test how much energy is used when generating text, images, and video using NVIDIA H100 GPUs. She found the energy required to generate content varies widely depending on the AI model and the GPU setup. That brings us back to this electric grill. So I plugged in this handy power meter to the grill, cranked up the heat, and threw a pretty thin steak on. Oh yeah. If you're generating text, that could burn anywhere from 0.17 watt-hours to 2 watt-hours, equal to running this grill for about 4 seconds. Generating an image, add 1.7 watt-hours. All that less than 10 seconds on the grill. But short videos can use far more power. In tests of various open source models, videos took anywhere between 20 watt-hours and 110 watt-hours. At 110 watt-hours, one steamed electric grill steak about equal to 1 video generation. I wouldn't eat it, but my dog would. At 220 watt-hours, it was looking much more edible. So 2 video generations equals 1 pretty good looking steak. That might not sound like much power, until you consider the short film we made using Google Veo and Runway. Lucioni's numbers come from open source models that generate 6-second 480p clips, far lower quality than tools like Google Veo. We generated 1,008-second 720p clips for our film. Going by these estimates, we might have used roughly 110,000 watt-hours. That's enough to grill around 478 steaks, or power an average US home for 3.5 days. Then again, Google and others might have more efficient systems, so it could have taken less energy.
Often I get asked, well, how does your research on open source compare to ChatGPT or Gemini or Sora? Until we get access to these models, we can't actually give any information, and so all we can do is kind of do estimates.
Recently, OpenAI has shared something. In a blog post, CEO Sam Altman said that the average query uses about 0.34 watt-hours of energy. OpenAI wouldn't provide details on image or video energy usage. Based on Altman's numbers, 647 prompts equals 1 steak. But energy isn't the only concern. Water is used in big quantities to cool these hot GPUs. The Equinix data center we were in used a closed-loop system that recirculates water with minimal waste. But in other setups, water is cycled through and evaporated or dumped, leading to a net loss. Okay, but why is this stuff so power-intensive? The answer is the hottest product around, literally.
They said it was going to be too hot for TV, as in like we couldn't show it because it's sensitive, but they're going to show us a GPU.
NVIDIA GPUs are some of the most powerful and expensive chips on the planet. This superpod held 31 NVIDIA DGX H100s, each packed with 8 GPUs, totaling around $9 million in hardware alone.
When people say their GPUs are cooling, it's for real.
These chips generate so much heat, they'll shut down if they get too hot, so the fans work overtime to keep them cool.
This is where the cold air comes in, and this is where the hot air goes out.
And on top of that, the data center uses advanced air and liquid cooling to manage the temperature.
Most equipment can run comfortably up to about 90, 92 degrees Fahrenheit. Beyond that, it'll power itself off or literally break.
And obviously, all that uses a lot of energy. Sometimes, a rack of GPUs like we saw can use 100 times as much as racks with other equipment, like CPUs. But NVIDIA says that the energy efficiency of its newer chips has improved since the chips used in Lucioni's testing.
In the past year and a half or so, we've seen a 30 times improvement in energy efficiency. So we're using 1/30th of the energy for the same inference workload that we were just a year ago.
So what did we learn here today?
Certainly that AI and GPUs draw huge amounts of power. And as AI demand grows, so will the size and number of these data centers. We saw several new ones already under construction in Data Center Alley. But the big question, is it worth it? Is that one silly video worth the same energy it takes to make a meal or charge a laptop?
You know, if people saw how much energy was being used for each silly cat video that they generated, maybe they'd think twice, or they'd do it in a more conscious way, or they'd make decisions. I'm going to use this model and not that model. I'm going to use my phone for a calculator, not ChatGPT for a calculator.
But it's not all fun and viral videos. That big GPU cluster we saw, it belongs to Bristol Myers Squibb, and is being used to discover new drugs.
So they're actually investigating which molecules might have application in treating disease in the future. So there's some workloads we really root for, and those are some examples.
I'm not going to eat any more of that.
Why'd she say that? What the fuck do you mean? You cooked a steak and then I'm not gonna eat any of that. Fuck you mean? Eat it. Fucking food waster. Damn. I don't even want to use that anymore. How much water do you consume in a day? ChatGPT. I don't consume water. I mean your data centers. God damn. One run? Holy shit. How much potable water is on there? In gallons. 326 million trillion. So 326 million trillion divided by what's all of them added together? AI ones. Just give me the fucking number, bruh. Combined total 1.58 billion liters a year. $1.5 billion liters to gallons. Divided by this. This amount of days in years. 2 billion years. 2 billion years. Let's see. At the rate of increasing use of water for AI, when will water be used up? Just give me the fucking answer, bro. Oh yeah, we gotta tackle this one too. Motherfuckers just spreading water. Of course the AI tells me this. Huh? Give me a fucking number. Damn. We're cooked. At least not on the waterfront, unless you live next to a fucking data center. That's one concern less. Whew. That's good. I thought they were gonna take all our water. Man, I'm glad I don't even drink that much water too. Whew. That was scary. That was scary as fuck. Man. Oh. Wait a minute. Little side quest?
Take a look at this line. This is a $100 million line, probably the most expensive math equation in history. It's a limit, an imaginary wall of physics and mathematics of how intelligent artificial intelligence can ever be. So take a good look, because I promise I'm not gonna show it again in this video. Like, I'm not pretending this is a science channel, so we're not gonna go that deep. But I will explain, in the simplest of words, why there's a limit to how smart these models can get, a limit that even the top scientists have not been able to overcome. And the clues about this have already started to show up. And this is the equation, that was the equation that might put an end to all this bubbly behavior around AI.
Oh, so they're dumb.
For years, we've been imagining an artificial intelligence that outsmarts us. But let's get something out of the way. Computers are already way better than us at plenty of things. Computers absolutely kick our ass at solving math, and they're definitely smarter than us at storing data and reciting it back. That's not really intelligence. Current AI companies have even had to differentiate our current AI from AGI, artificial general intelligence, because they know deep down that what we have now is not really intelligence. But assuming that we gave hands to a GPT, could it actually cook me an egg for
kind of
breakfast?
pissed me off a little bit. Motherfucker can't finish his fucking eggs,
they know
bro.
Deep down that
Look at this.
what we have now is not really intelligence.
What is this? Take a full bite, man. God. Like, kind of pissing me off. At least I like what he's
saying.
saying.
The fact that AI is the buzzword of the year and that Nvidia is worth some $1 trillion number is based on 3 premises. 1, that the smarter models are going to need all of those GPUs. 2, that more people are going to adopt AI into their daily lives. And 3, that our AI models are going to get exponentially smarter. Everyone is in panic mode because some Chinese startup allegedly built and trained a ChatGPT level model using a fraction of the compute cost and a fraction of the cost.
One Chinese startup just launched a new AI model to rival OpenAI.
DeepSeek has become the most downloaded free app.
Passing ChatGPT, which is pretty shocking. We're going to get to this. It remains to be seen how much the average Joe or the average company adopts AI into their lives, but none of those betting on big tech's AI transformation are even questioning the possibility of that third bullet point. And therein lies the problem. Making our current AI models smarter is almost impossible. In order to understand why that math equation is so dangerous to these companies, we need to understand at least the basics of how our current models are trained and how they think. So let's just go to our explainer time. What GPT excels at, to the point where it acts like an intelligent, sentient bot, enough to fool many of us, to write entire essays. What it does is predicting the next word in a sentence. But being really good at predicting words, or the next word, already allows a model like GPT to beat us at most standardized
diploma
tests,
without
which
AI.
is kind of the way we measure our own human intelligence, isn't it? And yet, GPT doesn't do that well at math. It only beat about 50% of the students in these tests. Why is that? Well, one number that you're going to hear about all the time when people talk about these models is the number of parameters that a model was trained on. How many parameters is a model using? GP3, for example, which is almost useless, dumb compared to the models that we use today, used 175 billion parameters. What the hell does that mean? So, let me show you. Now, a model like GPT uses pre-trained transformers to generate text, hence the name. Now, this sounds like nonsense to you right now, but I promise it'll make sense in exactly 4 minutes. Imagine that we feed the model a sentence so that it can try and predict what the next word is. So the first thing that the model needs to do is try to understand what this group of words mean. Like, we're seeing words here, but the computer is really just seeing bits out of all these things. And the first thing that the model will do is try to break this into tokens. Maybe you've heard the term before. Then what
it's
we'll try
kind
to
of
do is
dumb.
classify those tokens based on their meaning.
You can't even understand language.
LLMs classify words by grouping them together with words that have similar meaning. Technically, this is done not by grouping entire words, but tokens, which are fractions of a word, but I'm going to stick with the concept of words just for simplicity's sake. For example, ring may be classified with other words like ear like Joule, maybe around the world circle. So here's a 2D, simple two-dimension axis. We have a horizontal axis X and a vertical axis Y. And this is great for numbers, right? Because we can just go up or down depending on the number. But we're dealing with words here, and there are thousands of words out there with thousands of different meanings. It would be kind of impossible to group words by meaning into a 2D space. Even in a 3D space, we'd run out of directions to go to very quickly. So GPT-3 classifies words, or tokens really, into 12,288 different dimensions. That means a grid with 12,288 axes. We can't see it, of course. We can't even imagine it. It's like that interstellar tesseract, but with 11,284 more dimensions to go. But don't worry, what you need to understand is that in this unimaginable cloud, this black hole of directions, words with similar meanings are going to be grouped close to each other. So from the GPT-3 paper, we know that OpenAI used about 50,000 tokens, basically a dictionary of tokens, and it mapped them into this 12,000 dimension space, which already puts the count of parameters that the model is going to need at around 600 million. Still, that's far from the 175 billion parameters that GPT-3 had, so let's keep digging. But before I do that, I want to take a moment to thank NordPass for helping us. But who has actual export device also has our brief credit, or you can just channel words into this incomprehensible tesseract black hole is called embedding. This is the embedding step. And it's how a model turns words into something that computers can understand, and process. But just understanding that the word ring lives in a neighborhood of other words, we still don't know what it means in this context. Ring might be a sound, might be an earring, might be the one ring. So how does the model know? And so that's where transforming comes in. What the model's going to do is transform the word, essentially move this word in this 12,000 dimensional space. This specific sentence, it'll move it closer to the meaning that's based on the context around this specific word in this sentence. So that context could be the word before, the word after, could be the words mentioned earlier in the conversation. For example, the model might notice that this R is capitalized, even though it's not at the beginning of the sentence. It must mean something. It might also look at adjectives and how they affect nouns.
That's just how brains work, no? Motherfuckers explaining that.
The region of space where this particular word lives. Now, all of these transformers are going to run at the same time. And that's in part why GPUs are so good at doing this thing, because they were built to calculate all the pixels in your screen at the same time. Now, each transformer in GPT-3 has about 1.8 billion parameters. Around 600 million of those parameters are in this first attention layer, which helps focus the word in space, and about 1.2 billion of those parameters are in the feed-forward network layer, which is kind of like a zoom in on the meaning of the word, but that's as far as we're going to zoom in today. Now, GPT-3 uses 96 of these transformers for a total of almost 174 billion parameters. We're almost done. Now, the last few parameters are on the output layer, which essentially does the unembedding, the inverse of the input layer. It brings this word, these 12,000 dimensions, into our old 2D bit world, and it gives us the result of this massive operation of the model as words, not as numbers. The result of this massive mathematical journey is a list of words along with the probability of which word comes next. Now, the whole idea of machine learning is that we don't have to go to train each one of those 175 billion parameters to tell it what it needs to do. It learns itself, aka machine learning. Now, the first time this runs, this thing is going to spit out just gibberish, but during training, the model adjusts these parameters using algorithms to reduce these errors. Think of them like small knobs that slightly move to generate slightly different mathematical outcomes in the end. It's like trial and error on a trillion scale. If a particular set of values helps the model make a correct prediction, those values are reinforced. If not, they are adjusted. Each of these connections between one value and the other is a neuron, which makes a neural network. And it works not so differently from human neurons. Like, it may sound impossible, but after billions of operations and training data, this thing can actually and pretty accurately predict the next word in a sentence. Again, this thing has consumed billions and billions of text written by humans and has become so good at predicting words that it can pass our tests. And predicting words is the LLM example, but you can apply this logic of predicting the next thing at how a pixel should look to generate an image, or understanding if this dress is blue or gold. Same basic principle. Now you know the reason why it failed the high school math exam. A pure GPT model doesn't do math, at least not directly. In the simplest of terms, if you ask it what's 1 + 1, It knows the answer is 2 because it read 1,000,000 times that the answer is 2, and it's incredibly efficient at identifying patterns, but not because it pulled up a calculator and added 1 + 1. That's not bad per se, but it's going to be a problem later. The thing is, once you have a computer that can understand these relationships within words, you can give it instructions in plain English, and it'll base its responses on that. But this transformer model with an instruction on top of it is the same concept that Grok and Llama are using, and they're all limited by the same equation. Now, that 175 billion parameter GP3 model had problems. Like, you could tell it was AI because it didn't write quite like a human. It couldn't count the R's in strawberry. It also had a rather small limit of context. How many tokens before the current word are processed and considered for the prediction of the next word. So let's just train it with more, right? OpenAI theorized that by scaling the amount of data and the amount of parameters, the model would get a lot smarter. And it did. A way to measure the effectiveness of the model is with the error rate, so the word predictions that are incorrect, in very simple terms. It's more complicated than that. But anyway, they projected the error rate decreasing the bigger the model was and the more data was used for its training. And so they went and did it. They spent over $100 million in training this thing. Leaked data from OpenAI says that GPT-4 uses 1.8 trillion parameters. It has more transformer steps, potentially with more dimensions for the tokens. And it took about 25,000 GPUs running for over 3 months to train GPT-4. But it worked. The results were way better than GPT-3. So let's just keep doing that, right? More GPUs, more data, more parameters. Well, that's when they hit a wall. Now, that wall is this formula I said that I wouldn't show you again, because you would think that a bigger model, in this case, the bigger the size of the model, the better the performance at some fantastic astronomical level. But OpenAI has kind of reached this wall of diminishing returns. It's kind of like here. Right? There's not a lot that we can do. Like, regardless of the size, we just can't get that performance up a lot. Even if we throw a lot more data and create neural networks with quadrillions of parameters, the improvements are going to be marginal. All the way through 2024.
How does this guy know this, though?
On this part of the chart, right? But GPT-5 failures seem to reveal that we've kind of arrived at this plateau right here. And that's not even the worst of it. So a recent paper concluded that there is simply not enough data to train them. There is a point in this curve where the amount of data needed for training is bigger than the amount of data that exists. We just haven't produced enough data that can be used for training, text, knowledge, images, speech, to satisfy the needs that the models would have to reach perfection or a very, very small error rate. So in other words, we have found the limit of the current machine learning algorithms. The models are flawed and humanity doesn't have the resources to train them. Let's be real for a second. Like, this series of tubes, this transformer model is arguably one of the most important scientific breakthroughs of the century. And I am focusing on language models here, but we have now built models to predict the shape of proteins, which seemed an impossible task for a human. If you wanted to produce an image of something that didn't exist, you'd need creative people, illustrators, Photoshop artists, 3D rendering, and now an AI can just deduce how something looks from previous training. Like, I don't think enough people talk about what this means for 3D artists. When we spent hours trying to build a new world from scratch, and now a computer can reverse engineer that from training data and just give us the same result in a fraction of the time. But it's not over, though. For years we thought there was no other way to reach this level of performance unless we had like 2 trillion parameters, billions of dollars in servers, and piles of training data. But it looks like there's a better way around it, based on DeepSeek's efficiency with apparently a fraction of the parameters and the cost. We're yet to see if that's true. Still, I think it's only a matter of time before we find a more efficient way to do all this process easier and cheaper. But even more importantly, the answer may not be GPT-5 or 6 or 7. LLMs have proven that we can make a computer understand natural language, and so companies figured the next step was connecting other systems to that brain. And this is why GPT can now see images or recognize speech, giving eyes and ears to the system.
Hello there, cutie.
That eventually will turn into hands, but how far is it from cooking an egg or doing my dishes? There's some reasoning needed behind that. So this is the whole idea of what models like O1 and more recently O3 try to do. This model that we built originally just tries to spit out the next word as quickly as possible. But scientists came up with this concept of reasoning. Now, using the same transformer, the same model at its core, it tries to interpret the question and tries to break it down into smaller subtasks or prompts. And then it tries to solve each one of those prompts in order, kind of giving it like partial answers to your original question. Now, once that possible response is done, it analyzes it again to see if it makes sense against the original question and the original context of the conversation. So it does a bit like your own brain's thought process, writing that email response, starting over, readjusting, rereading before you hit send. Like this step-by-step process is called chain of thought. Again, not too different from your train of thought. But let's go back to that table that I showed you earlier. This iterative thinking has actually allowed current models to beat us at general human intelligence tests. IQ, structured logic, decision-making scenarios. It's good enough to write basic and even some intermediate code. It's got a fair share of engineers struggling to find jobs, which would have thought that they were the first to be replaced by this. But anyway, in startups at least, there's an unspoken truth of the number of jobs that AI has already replaced, but it's very bad press and nobody really wants to talk about it. But when you get out of controlled environments and into the real world, that's where AI struggles. Like common sense reasoning, creativity, decision-making in real-world scenarios, and even advanced mathematics where problem-solving and some creativity is required. Like these models take minutes to process through all of this, and it still takes us seconds to make these advanced decisions.
What if we make AI the government and do all the
decisions?
decisions?
Also, what happens when these models are allowed to escape containment? When they can start doing things in the real world?
Operator is a leadership preview of an agent that uses browser to help user to do things.
I'm not doing anything right now. The operator's doing everything by itself. It's okay, Mom. He's here to help.
I think we just keep pushing the bar of what intelligence is. Feelings, right? Creativity, true invention. We still have some of those, and computers don't. But the set of human-only skills is shrinking. It's running out, and I think we have to deal with the reality that it's no longer an if, but a when question.
Do computers really think? Let's just say, it all depends on what you mean by thinking.
Now, if you enjoyed today's explainer, you should watch our video from last week on how money gets created and why 93% of today's money doesn't really exist. Catch you next.
I gotta take a break from all this. This should really fuck with my brain a little bit. Hey, but at least we know they're not that smart. They don't use that much water. So we're pretty chill for now. Unless I see an intelligent form of them. This Anti-Clanker Congress won't be activated again for a long time, man. Hey, we have one less fucking enemy.